All right, time for us to get started. How's everyone doing? Tired. Middle of week 2. So I revealed the second assignment right before class. It is literally a copy of the first assignment, except the chapter titles have been changed. So you will be doing this 8 times. I'm not going to change the assignment. I'm not going to change anything really about it. This is still your exploration of Unity. So I'd like to hear of the new material that you are looking at. What experience do you have with it? If not, what did you learn? How do you plan to apply this to games you'll make next quarter? If you're not planning to take the course, pretend like you're planning to take the course next quarter and start to plan out what you would do. That'll just make you sadder when you don't take it, but. Question.
Always going to be 3 chapters a week?
Yeah. Yeah, with 24, the plan is to get through them in 8 weeks. And some of the last few are going to be a little less relevant. Some of that will just be publishing work and getting sound. It gets less and less relevant as we get closer to the end. And especially, you'll really have fun with the middle chapters about 210 level programming in C#. Really, it treats you like you've never programmed before. It's great. That gets to be a very easy week. All right. Questions before we get started? Reminders that there will be a study guide for an exam posted at some point on Friday. We'll do a review probably sometime next Thursday. I don't know if we'll need to do too much for it. I don't know if there's too much that I can really help too much with, but I'll still ask if people have questions, spend some class time to go over any answers to that and give you a couple of practice types of questions for what I might put on the exam. These are not exams that I have question banks for. I think I mentioned that. So I'll be writing them from scratch. And when I do that, I usually like to provide a sample question or two, something that really grounds you in what you can expect on an exam. Since this isn't a typical memorize something or even apply something that you've learned, it's likely to be very open-ended. Yeah.
You might have it on Canvas or in your syllabus, but when is the exam?
So the plan at the moment is Fridays of weeks 3, 6, and 9. I'm not 100% sure I'll stick to those exact weeks, but I want to stick them to Fridays. And I think at the end of week 3 is a reasonable place to put so far what we have covered, what we're going to be covering. I will probably make a good chunk of this some kind of design exercise and leave that very open-ended. That's my plan at the moment, at least, is some kind of design exercise.
Okay.
Other questions? All right, we're going to be doing something a little bit more fun today. We have to get through one slide, I think, to get there. So very, very little. We did this last time. I think we went through this whole slide last time. We were discussing that we don't know about the games that we make until we get feedback from other people who are playing the game. We are biased. We have our own ideas of how our game feels. Our own experience is biased. We've spent time playing similar games. We're more familiar with the controls. Because we made the game, every time we launched the game to test whether something was working, we were inadvertently getting experience with the controls. We were getting experience with the game. So what does it feel like to sit down with the as close to finished product as you have with no experience with it whatsoever and play it? You can't understand that until you ask that of somebody else. So at the bottom here, we have one of the ways that you might want to take notes from people who play your game. So in this instance, we have a location in the game where the issue occurred. They were fighting the first boss. The feedback that they said, and this can be paraphrased, quoted, "I didn't know what to do after the first boss. Where do I go now? Okay, now what?" And this is what was being said. This wasn't a question that you posed to them. This was just something that they were saying as they were playing the game. And you or someone you hire is going to be responsible for taking notes about that play session. So if they are making these underhanded remarks, they're not giving you feedback necessarily, but you've coached them to be vocal about their experience. If you're confused, vocalize that confusion. So here is a vocalization of a confusion in a game where someone doesn't know where to go next. So this is the kind of note that you'd want to take. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. Great. Now you can analyze that to figure out what is the underlying issue. Players don't know what the next step is after the first boss fight. Because it was the first boss fight, they've been handheld with a tutorial up until that point. This was where we decided as developers to take away the tutorial and allow people total freedom. So in the first instance where we gave them total freedom, they didn't know what to do. Maybe they needed some kind of quick suggestion or an arrow or something on the screen that directs them to that. So the proposed solution here, you can have multiple of them. The mentor character could return after the boss is defeated and give the player their second mission and maybe an initial direction for that second mission. Head into the forest where something. What is it going to look like in this class in the second quarter as we get to this? So you'll be developing over the course of 4 weeks. That's all you will have, 4 weeks from conception to a finished product, followed by 1 week to review other people's games and for your game to get reviewed by a significant chunk of the class. That's not very much time. So going through this iterative process from analysis to design to implementation to testing, ideally you're doing this once to twice per week, that entire cycle. And you can imagine that that's a lot for how much time you have. It's incredible that even this process won't finalize and make the game exactly like you want it to, but hopefully it's enough time for you to get it close to where you want it to, playable where you can get some feedback. So it will seem and feel more like a game jam game than it will like a finished release product that you purchase off of Steam or the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store. And when we get there, we'll talk about this in a lot more detail, but when you do this process, you'll want to also keep that in mind and be nice to your fellow developers. As much difficulty as you had putting together your games, the games that you are reviewing, those people will also have had those same constraints. So keeping that in mind, a 100 doesn't mean a Metacritic 100 level game. It means that within the constraints of this class, this is as close to perfection as could reasonably be expected. So here's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be doing some brainstorming about the kinds of games that you might want to develop. But to do this, I'm not going to quite give you full and total freedom. What I want you to do is you're going to create your own interesting diagram. This is something that you should probably do on paper. So if you have any paper with you, go ahead and pull that out. If not, open up some kind of drawing app on something so that you can start to draw out some ideas. If you don't have something, maybe one of your neighbors does. Opportunity to make a lifelong friend. Oh, right, we're a class full of introverts. Never mind.
All right.
All right, once you have this out, you're going to start with any theme. This can be anything in the world. Just throw that in a bubble in the middle of the diagram, and then you're going to start to expand out from that. You're going to think of the first things that come to mind that are close to, relevant to. They don't have to be directly tied to, but just something that makes you think of, and start to write that at the next layer outside of that. As you do that, write that, draw a circle around it, and connect them. And continue to do this iteratively. You don't just have to do it to what's in the center. Now you can start expanding on some of the outer ideas as you want. and continue until you have about 20 or so ideas. Don't censor your thought process at all. Don't think about, is this something that I could do with a game? Is this something that I just, whatever comes to mind, something that is similar to. So as an example, I could do something like the first word that comes to mind. I don't know why I'm doing this. We'll say sports. All right, sports have a ball. They involve, I don't know, some throwing, some kicking, some sportsmanlike conduct. So apart from this, cool, respect. Money. I don't know, stuff like this. And continue this process till you have about 20 or so ideas, and they don't even have to be necessarily related to each other. So once you get pretty far out, it doesn't have to immediately tie to sports necessarily, and whatever other idea you have. So just throw a bunch of ideas on the page. Do that for a few minutes.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Doing, we have 20-ish ideas. Raise your hand if you could use a couple more minutes. Let's give a couple more minutes. For those of you who have finished, number them. Put a number in each bubble associated with one of these words or short phrases. Not yet. Start with one, make them in order. So have 1, 2, as many ideas as you have, but the actual number assigned to which does not matter. The one that's in the middle does not have to be number 1.
Oh.
We do, and we have things numbered and some ideas coming together.
Honestly, I'm so confused right now.
Any clarification I can give?
I'm not sure.
So we just have a bunch of
Oh.
loosely related ideas in circles connected to each other by some loosely related concept. Yeah,
Can we have 2 circles pointing to like the same from the other direction, basically?
sure, you can make them directed. That will end up not mattering here in a moment. All that matters are the words you have on the page. So as long as we each have 10-ish ideas, I think this can work. It's better with 20, but 10 will do just fine for the moment. Next, we're going to do something called collection and collision. So as computer scientists, we don't necessarily need note cards for this. It's kind of fun to do on a series of note cards, but you can just use, if they're numbered, a random number generator to select 2 numbers at random. Write down the numbers that the RNG gives you. And you're going to refer back to your image. That will give you 2 words and or ideas. Your next task is to write a 1-paragraph description of a game that you would like to make, where the central idea of that game is both of these ideas. It may almost make no sense to pair these 2 things together, but now your design space is make a game where these 2 concepts are the central concepts. You have total freedom outside of that, but write about a 1-paragraph description. Do that a few different times to come up with different ideas for games. And then right before class, I published a discussion on Canvas and made it completely anonymous. Take your favorite of the multiple ideas you come up with for this and write that 1-paragraph description as a response to that discussion. Again, it's completely anonymous. And then do this 2 more times so that you have a total of 3 different pairs of ideas. And you've come up with your favorite idea that you've made for each one of those. Those should all be separate replies to this discussion.
I do it 3 times, get 3 sets of numbers.
Yeah, so you're gonna get 3 sets of numbers, 3 pairs for each one of those, design 2 or 3 different games. Take your favorite idea from that and reply to the discussion with that. This is not graded. This is not something that I'm gonna be looking at the quality of what you produce. This is just a brainstorming activity. No grade associated with it.
Like the discussions on Canvas.
Should be.
Okay.
If it's not, let me know. I don't do too much with discussions on Canvas, so it's very likely I made a mistake with the visibility.
It's kind of a nemesis system, like a returning an enemies.
Huh? Interesting.
Oh.
What can you do with that hasn't been done before, or is? Or if you're gonna use something like that as the premise, in what different way could that be applied that hasn't been done? So here are a couple of starter ideas for you. So maybe you get Groundhog Day and Gears off of the prior slides example. Okay, so 3 different game ideas. A gardener builds some crazy contraptions to trap a groundhog who has been eating her garden. Great. Gears of War style shooter, soldiers are reliving a battle until they get it perfect, like in the movie Groundhog Day. Time management game like Diner Dash, where the player must manage the weather so each season accomplishes goals and transitions to the next on time. Very different ideas, both using the concepts of Groundhog Day and Gears. Another would be Belt and Snake. Classic game of Snake. Snake eats some apples and grows, avoids running into itself, but it's on a moving conveyor belt when it does this. Snake moves across a room camouflaged as different people's belts, jumping from waist to waist. Strange idea, but who knows? Maybe that would work. Snake hypnotizes a person, but can only control them to do very simple things. As the person's belt, the snake must swing and platform them through some levels to escape the zoo. Really strange ideas. But hey, some of these sound fun. And some of them sound ridiculous in the way that if I were to play them, I would probably be thoroughly enjoying how ridiculous they were. So nothing says you have to stick to something quite like this, but just a brief description, go into as much detail as you want, but it doesn't have to be any more detailed than this. Is it clear what we're doing? Anyone have any questions or general confusions?
What we submit, do you want it to just be like a number one? We don't have to submit 3 different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Make a few of them yourself or think through a few combinations and whatever you think would be a really intriguing idea, that's the one you're gonna write publicly.
Okay.
Oh no, my God, this is really hard. So I'm only writing one of the ideas in the discussion.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you would go through all of this work and then say, of these,
I like that.
I like this one. I think that this is ridiculous and fun, and this is the one that I think would be the one that I would really want to go make. If I had the freedom to make one of these three things that I just.
That's the only one you're gonna put in the discussion?
Yeah.
You're gonna have a total of 3?
A total of 3, yeah, one for each of the combinations of ideas that you come up with. If you get the same idea, re-roll it. Don't want 2 copies of the same idea, unless that gives you really interesting ideas, in which case, why not? Run with it.
Like 4.
When you write the idea, go ahead and write the names like this as well. So go ahead and write that. What I was going off of was Groundhog Day and Gears. Here's the game idea.
Favorite from this season.
Publish.
It's so like say.
With some.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what we're gonna be doing with this is posting ideas either by the end of class, if you don't finish this by the end of class, give people up through this evening. And then sometime tomorrow morning before class, go through all of these ideas, read them, and like up to 5 of them that are not your ideas. And what we're going to do in tomorrow's class is we're going to have a discussion about what kinds of ideas seem to be the most popular. How can that inform how we brainstorm and how we think of some of these ideas that are more likely to be intriguing to people who are not us? So again, don't start voting until, let's say, after midnight. Hopefully not too many of you are still up at that point, but if you are, you can start liking after midnight. Let's give people that long to get them all in. And again, no grade, no names attached to anything. So your posts are not gonna, people aren't gonna know these ideas are coming from you. The likes are also anonymous. So no one will know who liked whose idea. It's all about the idea, not about the person behind the idea. Yeah. Sure.
Should be for that. Beverage warranties too, or.
Yeah, that's what I got.
The fact that I got like the information was happening.
That is a very interesting combination. It totally works. Yeah, I'm not picky too much about the exact format, but I would post them as 3 separate things so people can like each individual game separately. That is a good point. Yeah, have 1 game per post, and that way a like isn't for an entire group of ideas, a like is for a single idea.
But we only need 1 post for sure, and then we can.
1 post per pair of games.
Oh.
So you're doing that 3 times. So
Oh.
you should have, each person should have 3 posts, 3 different game ideas, 1 per pair of ideas. So you're gonna do all of this work, select 1, post once. Do all of this work, select 1, post once.
Are we including the keywords that we use?
Yes, yeah, include those keywords. So include this and this, or this and this. And people can decide on how they want to like it. Was it a clever use of those words? Was it just sound like a game that's fun and you'd enjoy playing? Yeah,
So do we have to, I'm so long, right? So we pick one pair of ideas, write 3 games about those 2 ideas.
Yeah,
And then post each of them separately.
pick one of those and post.
Okay, and then do the same thing with.
Then do it 2 more times with 2 different randomly chosen words.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Any confusions about what we're doing?
When I go home, grass day.
Yeah,
So like, what's that first and then.
modify it in some other way, even if it's similar to, oh, that's kind of like this. What else could you do with it?
It's just like, I have 2 words, adventure and listen.
Adventure and listen.
Yeah, and the first game that I come with is early March, so we would have to.
Okay.
Basically,
Yeah, so some kind of detective.
Yeah.
Instead of making it exact, how could you do something detective based where the focus is really on listening? How about an idea of your protagonist is blind? And now
Now
that,
another game that I think of that, where your protagonist is black and you're supposed to walk through the.
Yes.
Blind people like make sound and.
yeah, maybe what you see visually is some interpretation of a sound. So now you have to associate the sound and how this character is interpreting that sound and make real life decisions about what's happening around you.
See, you have a much better imagination than that.
That's the idea of the brainstorm, is to sit and think, to figure out what could I do with that? What would be fun? What seems intriguing? What hasn't been done before?
And for example. Like Johto games.
Yeah, so there's lots that exists in that realm, but what is something that either hasn't been done or some other way of thinking about the concept of a story? Maybe you're the author. And you experience real life and need to now write a new chapter of your story. How do you convert what has happened to you, the person in real life, to the story that you want to create? How does, lots of directions you could go with that to create a new idea, even if it's words that naturally go together. And there's a lot that does that. Try to think outside the box. You post something that already exists, people will say, that already exists. I don't want to go play a carbon copy of that. What could you do with those ideas that would reinvent the wheel, see the world a little differently? Yeah. I love both of your word selections are very interesting.
I was waiting off, I started with adventures and just was going towards like Dark Souls. Or like explore, to fly, to listen to dialogue.
Yeah.
And PCs, and I'm like, one of those, okay, it's random choice, each adventure and listen, great. Here's a very terrible story.
It's interesting that both of your RNGs picked your original idea.
Great, great.
Very interesting.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's tough. Seems really hard. So random. Okay.
Just write it down.
It'd be kind of fun, right?
Any people having some issues coming up with some ideas on their own?
Is that a game that exists?
If this is turning into a big struggle for you, you can discuss these ideas with someone around you. Could be directly a neighbor. You could turn around and find someone else in the class, bounce your ideas off of them, see if they have some way of helping you to think about the idea.
So I like that, yeah.
What? You wanna go first? Sure. Okay.
They were thinking on here.
I don't remember. Like,
I was like, I thought random fucking word, like it's a pattern, like so just like. I should have said. Yeah, so it's like, I don't know, like that. Yeah, like your central idea, when you go like, or something like that, and it's like randomly go.
You're a good doctor. And you don't get sent.
Here's what I thought. Where you are, it's like,
What you experience directly translates something like this. It doesn't translate as the chapter of the story that is the most sellable book. So how does that inform the choices that you make out in real life in a visual novel style format? And then at the very end of that, you could use some kind of AI to write the book that then the user could read, some character going through exactly that. And then with some algorithm, come up with some number of book sales that you get off that idea that becomes your keyword. I mean, we don't know, but it sounds ridiculous. And I'm here.
Right now, because like they would really use this feature where like you listen to the environment.
Yeah.
And then you explore this and I'm like,
Cause I
think it's gonna be the best.
That's a cool idea. What can you tie to it? How could that be? Create some events. So you listen to the world around you. The world around you allows you to, what can you do with it?
just like this.
There's a lot of like.
Yeah.
It's just these two things. It's really hard to come up with like. Find so many people.
This doesn't have to be the next amazing thing.
So it's like.
The tire learning.
There's gonna be a lot of iteration between this idea and whatever a finished product based on this idea. But how do we think about generating?
There's kids like.
I wanna make a game. How do we get that inspiration? You don't wanna recreate something that already exists. You wanna do something different.
For. No, it's, no, my, oh, it's, yeah. Oh.
Do people want additional in-class time to work on this and to think about it? Would you rather think about this at home on your own time? we could transition and do just a little bit of the end of this with the last few minutes of class. If you feel like you're underway and understand what we want to be doing ahead of tomorrow, we will certainly be coming back to this. And I think analyzing this is really intriguing and shows a lot of the unknown of how your ideas are going to be perceived by the outside world. You're going to come up with some really good ideas, and some of those aren't going to be as popular as some other ideas that you don't like very much, and that's going to be intriguing, trying to figure out why that is.
Only my opinion's right every once.
And then everyone believes that, and then we have League of Legends. So let's imagine that we are making a game. And this is barely readable, but left-hand side says idea. Right-hand side says game. We now have a little bit of experience coming up with an idea. Can you immediately start coding this game? And if you were to sit down, write code, end up with a game, what do you think that game would look like? Some kind of garbage. So good game design looks kind of like this. We have idea, which leads to a prototype, which leads to another prototype, which leads to a prototype with a completely changed direction, which leads to a prototype that kind of brings it back into the direction it was originally headed in, but taking a lot of the ideas from that prototype that was very different from the prototype before it. So there's a lot of iteration as you come up with playable prototype, playable prototype, playable prototype. You keep getting feedback on each of those prototypes, and you will slowly refine that prototype. And eventually it reaches a point where it is fun. But for the first few of those prototypes, it's probably not particularly fun or feature heavy with really fleshed out features that work well together. So don't think that when you come up with that idea that you have to have the entire game fleshed out when you do it. A lot of game design comes from an aha moment. Wouldn't it be cool if we could this idea? You get a very basic prototype together that once you figure out something like what does the space look like? How are we moving throughout this space? What do basic decisions look like? What do the basic mechanics look like? Get that fleshed out to the point where you can interact in that environment. Get some feedback from people already. How does it feel to move this character around? How does it feel to be in this space? From there, you're going to refine that concept and make some changes, implement a couple new features, and test again. Continue to do this iteratively until you run out of time and have to release something. Hopefully that is a fun game. These ideas get slowly locked in over time. So in the scope of this class, you're probably spending the first week to week and a half just changing anything and everything as you determine that the direction of the game needs that. Once you reach about that 1.5 week point where there are 2.5 weeks left of development, you need to start locking some things in place. So now these basic features can't change. Maybe we can add some features on top of this, but they all have to utilize the existing features. We can't get some grandiose idea that makes us start over or go rewrite the basic building blocks of our game. So you can imagine it's being a slowly solidifying piece of stone. It starts out as a human that it's just slowly being petrified from the limbs inwards or from the heart outwards, however you want to think of it. And those basic systems get locked in over time, and anything on the extremities can change up until the very end. But that is a slowly moving piece of petrifying human. Anything can be changed as long as there's reason to, but we need to start committing, whether they're good or bad. If you commit to something that's bad and then try to make the best of that situation, that'll end up being better for you than completely reinventing the wheel. The idea is good, but the implementation never got there. That is frustrating to be a player of. So especially when you have that limited amount of time, makes a ton of sense. If we're familiar with the concept of vaporware, anyone know what vaporware is or want to define the concept of vaporware? Yeah,
a product that's announced but is never actually fully finished or released.
yeah, so something that when you approach it, you can see through it. The game is so shallow or not fleshed out to an extent that it looks like this grandiose advertisement. You go to play the game and you realize the features are half-baked. Nothing really has come together. It's not cohesive. You can see right through the game. It doesn't feel like an experience. It feels like something that was just thrown together, hacked together at the last minute. So the best game is one that is finished and in the hands of players. That means that people are playing your game, you're getting feedback from that, but hopefully you're also making money. So basic stages of development, we'll go through this in more detail as we get deeper into this, but pre-production is when you're still experimenting, you're coming up with some new ideas, you're putting those ideas into the game world and testing them to see, is this fun? Does this work together? You go into production. Once you're in production, things are starting to get locked down. You're producing the final product. And as you produce that final product, some things in the extremities may change, but production ends when you have a complete playable game. It's not just a prototype. Now it is the entire game as you intend to release it. Has all of the features, all of the functionality. Then you go into alpha with the idea of you're going to play test not just with people you have hired internally or your own development team, but now you're actually going to release the game to a targeted subset of players, have them play the game, get that feedback before it becomes super public. In beta, you're done changing the systems. You solely want to fix bugs and balance if there are any remaining balance concerns. So nothing new. Finally, once you go gold, that is when you release to the full public. You're no longer in testing, you have a released product. Once you go gold, you can continue to support your product over time. You'll go through a post-release where you fix bugs as you or the community find them, continue to work through balance. Maybe you are starting the production of an expansion or a DLC or the next game, but you still need to be looking back at the last product that you released and making sure that it's in a state that you continue to be happy with as more and more players experience your game and find those remaining large issues. Questions on any of this? All right, we are done for the day. Remember that we want to submit some stuff by tonight, submit those ideas, and tomorrow, rate them. Like up to 5 of them. You don't have to like 5, but if you find 5 that sound intriguing, like up to your top 5.
No, I hate all.
That way you're not liking absolutely everything. We'll analyze what's popular and what's not tomorrow in class.
Yep. Just like mine 5 times.
Thank you. Yep. Anything.
Real life events.
Sure. If you wanted to make a game out of a real life event.
Yeah, it's my idea would be like a persona mix.
Okay,
Based on
I
my
know,
life
right?
experiences and based on my characters.
interesting. Okay, yeah, I can see that being really interesting, playing through that and understanding. Games are a wonderful way to understand. To talk about that in the next slide deck or two. There are some experiences that have been turned into games, and it's a great way to start to understand how people are different, how their experience is different, because you're actually living that life by the person who lived it.
Yeah, that's the image.
Yeah. Yeah, which is really cool. You can't get that too well in any other format. It's a movie, you're watching that person. Hopefully you understand why they're doing what you're doing, but if you're in charge of the decision and actually controlling that, it's just a whole new level of understanding that you reach when you take control of that avatar.
Oh, I got you, yeah.
It's cool. Yeah, I like the idea.